Now let's look at a small article which talks about the cyber security present in the banking sector, right? Whether they have the relevant infrastructure for managing the cyber security, and what are the typical perceptions or the typical thoughts which the banking sector has with respect to this cyber security. So anything to do with the cyber attacks, the system based attacks today, they are very common, and probably if they happen in the financial services firms, it is going to be a threat to the economy altogether, not just to the banking sector. These kind of attacks can become big threats to the overall economy as well. And what we typically see is these are very frequent nowadays, very sophisticated, and creating huge losses. And why do these attacks, probably if we look at over the last 15 years, what are the various things that are contributing to these kind of attacks? The enemy nations, unfriendly nations, the enemy nations, they are trying to break through the systems to get into the intelligence and the intellectual properties of the company of the countries. Then we have hacktivists who are more and more active hackers. They are trying to make some kind of political statements by disrupting the system per se. We have organized crime groups, cyber gangs, other criminal breaches where the major intention is monetary gain. So different sites, different types of groups for different kinds of objectives, they are trying to break through the systems of the country and the banking system per se. And today the technology is improving quite drastically, becoming more and more advanced. The cost of implementing the technology is going down and down and down. So the barriers to entry in this kind of developing technology market has gone down drastically. And while this is good when I use the technology for advancement purpose, but it will have its own set of problems when we use the same technology for trying to break through the systems. So from the criminal's perspective also, it is giving them a good number of avenues to try to seek out for the new ways to perpetrate the cyber fraud. Now, keeping all this in mind, a survey has been conducted in the United States with 60 community and regional banks, 12 credit unions, and 82 foreign bank branches in the United States, totaling out to 154 sample elements. A survey is conducted out of this 154 organizations which are depositories, and again they got classified as small, medium, big or large based on their assets. Anything less than 1 billion they were treated as small firms, 1 to 10 billion are medium, and anything more than 10 billion in terms of assets they are treated as large. And the major areas in which the questionnaire was targeting was the information security framework which is existing in each of these banks, whether they understand it and what are the things that constitute the framework for what is the corporate governance activity right from the board to senior management to the operational departments. What is the kind of corporate governance activity, auditing kind of activity around cyber security? What kind of penetrating tests are being performed? At what frequency they are performed? How are the results of this penetrating test being analyzed and communicated internally? what is that the banks are talking of with respect to the budget that they are allocating towards this cyber security infrastructure improvement, and what are the costs that they are incurring in reality, and what are the frequency, what at what rate the attacks are typically coming, typically what is the kind of attacks that they are getting, how much is the loss that the bank is typically facing because of it, and in how much time they are recovering back. And finally, the questionnaire was talking about what are the future plans the banks have with respect to cyber security. Now, when the questionnaire, sample questionnaire has been created and circulated among the various banking participants, a few key observations that came out of them. As far as the management of the information systems is concerned, almost all the banks have it in some form or the other. But one thing is they rely not completely on their internally developed mechanisms, but they are outsourcing some of them. They are dependent on external vendor based resources to manage their IT system. This is on one side, though it's a cost effective kind of a mechanism, it could very well increase the risks in the system as well. And though not many companies are completely outsourcing their process, but not many companies are completely developing it in house also. So that's one thing which the team has identified with respect to the IT systems management. Coming to the framework, it is clearly said majority of the banks, they do have the information security framework purely in a written form. The information security policy in a written form. On a regular basis, they provide awareness levels to the various employees through the training processes. They try to provide for every employee, they are trying to talk about the risk management aspects with respect to cyber risks, where the focus is more on identification of the different risks, the audits, when the information security audits are going to happen, the results of the audits, each of the incident when have occurred, how they are going to be monitored, how they are going to be reported, and finally talking about the comprehensive communication plan to respond. All this is there as a part of the information security framework of majority of the banks. So that's a positive note. But coming to the various technologies which are associated with security, majority of the firms are using very good antivirus softwares, spywares, malware detection tools, firewalls, the server based access controls, not at a client level, various intrusion detection tools they are using, intrusion prevention mechanisms they are using, vulnerability scanning tools they are using. So they are using almost all kinds of cyber attack protection kind of tools. They are encrypting the data, they are encrypting the files. All these things are being done at least by a good set of large banks, though medium and small banks are also doing in a quite good proportion. And they are trying to use the new technologies and tools primarily to discover unauthorized devices. Let's say today new gadgets, new devices are typically coming and people are accessing the networks through various devices. So there are various tools that are getting developed to discover the use of many unauthorized kind of devices. So even if we see smart cards, one-time password kind of tokens, different kinds of security enhancement mechanisms are being implemented at different kinds of banks, smaller, medium, as well as large ones. Coming to the aspect of penetration testing, this is one place, though they are doing some kind of improvement. Today, what we see is across various firms, it is generally done on an annual basis. But if it is done on an annual basis, it is purely used to just get an overview or a high level perspective of the vulnerabilities that are possible within the banking organization. But what is expected is that same penetration testing should be on an ongoing basis. There should be an ongoing system which should monitor the complete vulnerabilities. Scanning should be done at appropriate intervals of time, and to a large extent it is suggested if it is performed completely in-house rather than trying to go with third party consultant, because that's a core operation of the business, and it's not that heavily suggested that these kind of core activities be outsourced. Coming to the next aspect, the budget and the costs. Generally, this budgeting per cybersecurity is allocated as a part of the IT budget of the firm or the operations budget. And most of the firms, they are typically trying to maintain a constant proportion as a part of a dedication towards the IT. In some companies, there was some amount of increase, but definitely there is no decrease in any of the companies with respect to the investment towards IT risk and cyber security. And they are typically the major reason that they are citing for their spending on this cyber security is one, to talk about compliance and regulatory. So rather than an internal realization, it's an external pressure that is driving them in terms of implementing the various tools and techniques towards the cyber security. But yes, some of them very clearly responded that business continuity, disaster recovery planning, and a reputational risk. Today we see a lot of well established firms like Bear Stearns or Washington Mutual or any of these big names, or even Lehman Brothers, any of these big names, when they were really at their peak, they were really one of the leaders in their own businesses. But the moment they typically lost out or they typically got exposed to the risk, there are lots and lots of reputational issues that kept floating around. So, all these things in mind, the companies are devoting lots of budgets as well as costs to make themselves more and more compliant to various IT and cyber related threats. And when it comes to corporate governance, today it is majorly handled by the IT department only. Only in a few companies we see compliance managers and CEOs, CIOs are involved, but otherwise it is today concentrated completely with the IT department. This is one thing where the cyber security's responsibility also should get integrated as a part of the overall risk management process of the firm, and it should not be the job of only the IT risk management department. So that's one area of improvement. So the major thing that is very much expected is there should be a holistic approach, not just an IT centric kind of an approach, and it should it should be integrated as a part of the overall risk management efforts of the company, and there should be a full fledged effort in terms of managing the cyber risk. And a few more things as a part of the findings, focusing on cyber security incidents, whatever the companies have really experienced, it is very clear that the larger the size of the institution is, the larger the bank is, the larger is the effort that is made by external intruders to typically get into the system. So the bigger firms have got lots and lots of malware and phishing attempts. There are quite a time when a few specific account takeovers were tried out. The data theft, identity theft, telecommunication network based disruptions, data integrity breaches, third party payment processing breaches, and mobile banking exploitation. All these are the problems which almost every bank, irrespective of size, has typically faced. A few organizations, generally smaller in size, because of not being able to spend extraordinarily on these various technology and infrastructure related stuff, they have experienced successful breaches. So all while major organizations, they were able to identify it in the earlier stages, preventing a monetary damage, whereas these smaller ones, they felt that they were completely intruded, and a little bit of monetary damages have come up. Some significant monetary damages also have occurred, and whatever is the losses they have calculated, it was completely based on the reimbursement they had to do with the customer, the audit process, the consulting process, whatever the payments that were supposed to be done, the software that has been implemented or purchased to really deploy these various detection mechanisms, whatever the policies, services, the reputation, brand loss, customer business loss, new customer loss, all these things were being taken into consideration for computing the overall loss that came up in the process. And when it comes to planning for the future, because of the barriers that are very limited with respect to the hackers in terms of using information technology, it has to be a very constant effort even from the bank's perspective, that their team develop the sophistication of different kinds of threats that may come up, different emerging technologies that are going to come up. They have to really plan out for all these things as a part of their future efforts. And getting into the continuing challenges. Now we have been discussing that the development in the technology is happening at a much faster rate. So there should be a few dedicated teams who should continuously keep themselves updated. Otherwise, it's very much difficult for a bank or for some non-technology based firm to provide services or to use the data in a high technology kind of an environment. And at the same time, there is a competitive pressure. The competition is using all these advanced tools and technologies. So to stay in the market, even the new cyber security related enhancements need to be done by each in the banking sector. And companies are mandatorily forced as a part of the regulation to incorporate and integrate new technologies into their products. And on one side there is a competition, you have to grab the market, but at the same time the security maintenance is also very important. So there is some kind of competition, so probably you are focusing more and more on your marketing efforts to improve your market share, but at the same time you have to go with compliance related stuff to improve the security and offer better customer service as well. So that becomes a challenge in this current process. Now, to a large extent, large number of banks are typically outsourcing their critical banking functions to the third parties. It may be cost effective, keeping in mind the IT companies' knowledge in terms of quickly providing the IT related services, but at the same time, it is exposing the bank to various cyber attacks. So cyber risk level depends in large part on the processes that it is putting in place with respect to the third parties. More and more reliable third parties are going to reduce the risk. Trying to look out for those kind of third parties, just looking at the cost factor, reducing the cost. The cost of development could be much lesser, but that could very well translate into the cost of a cyber threat going significantly higher. Cybersecurity, data protection requirements, they should be incorporated into the contract document that you get into with the third party. But at the same time, we have to understand it's not the amount that the company is spending on a cyber program which is a reflection of the strength. It may, if it is spending on completely useless tools and technologies, duplicated tools and technologies, which are not going to really meet the business requirement, or probably purchase a software but don't update it, don't deploy it in an effective manner, then obviously whatever is the cost that you are spending on that particular software or on that particular process is going to do no good in terms of improving the cyber security of the various data infrastructure and the processes, right?